Welcome to the tutorial of installing ADDS role on Windows Server 2016 and learning how to promote a domain controller. Well, so far in our evaluation journey, we have seen how to create a virtual lab, how to create few VMs, attach networks to them. In this video, we are going to learn how to install the ADDS role and how to basically create a domain like a replica of a corporate domain. Now, before we do that, let's quickly recap into the journey that Windows Server has had so far. Starting with year 1993, way back in 1993 when NT 3.1 was launched. That's when it all started. NT 3.1 till NT 4.0 is what's known as the NT era. NT 4.0 was in year 1996, and that was when for the first time my computer and my documents were to be seen on a Windows Server operating systems. Then starting with year 2000, when Server 2000 was launched, it started something called as AD era or Active Directory era. That was the first time or the first flavor of Windows Server when Active Directory was introduced along with MMC and DFS. Gradually Microsoft kept on adding new features to the server operating system. In year 2003, Windows Server 2003 was launched, and so was 2003 R2 in year 2005. Then starting with year 2008, Hyper-V was introduced. Virtualization was a major push during that time, and that's why we can safely call that era of Server 2008 till Server 2012 R2 as virtualization era. Server 2008 R2 was launched in year 2009. That's when Recycle Bin, one of a very popular and useful feature of Active Directory, was introduced. 2012 saw Server 2012, and I remember it was Windows Client 8 operating system which was launched as well along with Server 2012. Both of these operating systems did not have a start menu in them. Server 2012 R2 was launched in year 2013. It again had a lot of improvements from its predecessor. Right now we are going to evaluate Server 2016, and as we know, we are right now in cloud era. This server operating system can be safely called as a cloud ready server operating system, and we will see in a moment why. So if you want to learn what's new in Server 2016, it's almost equivalent to learning what's new in Hyper-V, because most of the new features of Windows Server operating system is towards making Hyper-V much more secure and adding new features into it. Now, why is security such an important topic these days? We have often come across situations where an organization or a corporate environment wants to migrate over to a cloud. However, it's the security concerns which does not allow them to take that next step. We often come across questions from customers like, is my data safe in the cloud? Are my users, are my information safe in the cloud? So why do these questions keep popping up? It's because there are always threats, sometime intended, well, most of the time intended. The threats about stealing your data, the threats about doing wrong to your network infrastructure. So what are these threats? These threats are like malwares, anti-spywares, which work like a program and remains undetected in your network, whereas they keep on doing damages and stealing data from your infrastructure. Microsoft has introduced a lot of new features like shielded virtual VM, shielding virtual machines, host guardian machine, lot of other features to protect your data when you migrate into the cloud. So what these features actually do is it kind of works on a decoupling principle. It decouples the admin privileges from the privileges of a VM. I mean, the admin privileges of the host machine with the privileges that a VM running on those machines has got. And why is this necessary? This is necessary because an anti let's say a malware, how does it function? It tries to acquire the credentials of somebody like a domain admin, and when it acquires that credential, it becomes powerful enough to sort of steal any data, any information within that infrastructure. Okay, another highly talked about introduction in Windows Server 2016 is the nano servers. These are highly streamed down versions of the actual server operating system with client experience. So you take the entire server, just keep on streaming it down to only the bits which are required or important for installation of a feature like a Hyper-V. That's what it is. I'm sure this feature is going to be very popular and talked about in the coming days. And we will also have a session about nano servers times later. Alright, so this is Windows Server 2016 machine which we created in one of the earlier sessions. Let me quickly log into this machine. And right now it's not connected, it's not joined to any domain. So I'm logging it with a local administrator account. This account gets created when you are installing the server operating system. Alright, so my machine is up, and I've given it a name which is easily recognizable. I've given it a name DC Win 2016 because I want to create it as a domain controller, and it's on a Windows Server 2016. Since this is a lab environment, I have disabled the firewall. However, I'm sure you know that it's not safe to disable firewall in the actual corporate environment. That's why you have firewall rules, the inbound and outbound rules which you need to configure. Other thing that I quickly wanted to show is this machine, as you might have noticed, is connected to a host only adapter. So right now there is no internet connectivity on this, and I've given it a static IP 10.1.2.5 which is fairly well practiced. You don't want your domain controllers to get the dynamic allocation of IPs. You always provide them static IPs. Alright, so that's all that I have done so far. Let me go ahead and enable remote connectivity on these machines. Okay. One of the things that I usually do is I usually create a few local users just in case something terribly wrong happens with my machine. I might still be able to log on to the local machine. Call it admin1. I'll give it a password. And I'll say create. Alright, so let's go into the server manager. and let's go into add roles and features segment. Click on next. Installation type, a role based, feature based installation. Yes, I want to install the roles on this server. Let me only select the domain services at this point in time and DNS. It's fairly common to keep the DNS on the same server as domain controller. And I click on next. Group policy management is getting installed, which is fine. Now you see, with so much emphasis on the cloud, it informs me that Azure Active Directory is a separate online service. It can provide simplified identity and access management. So there are lots of features nowadays available which helps you to integrate your on-premise Active Directory with your cloud directory. And we will learn about all those in later videos. For right now, what we are going to do is we are going to install the DNS server as well as ADDS. And let's see how it goes. Alright, so as we see, it has finished installing the features that we had requested. Now all this while that it was trying to install these features, I could have just closed it and let the installation progress in the backend. Now it's giving me a notification. Let's see what it is. Alright, so it says, however you have installed the feature, there is still some post-deployment configuration which is required to promote this server to domain controller. Let's see what it is. So here are the options. Say select the deployment operations, and I can add this particular server as a domain controller to an existing domain. I can add this domain to an existing forest, or I can add it as a new forest. Well, I will add it as a new forest because obviously in my lab this is the first domain controller which I am going to install. So I will call it as bjxl.local. Now this is an interesting one. Select functional level of the new forest and root domain. So this is where it's asking me to select the forest functional level, domain functional level. It is recommended to keep the forest functional level and the domain functional level at the highest possible levels so that you are able to utilize all the features that the current operating system has to provide. So just in case if you don't know, domain functional level is the lowest version of operating system that you can have, that one of your domain controllers is running on. So in this case, let me keep it as 2012 R2, and let me keep the domain function level as well as 2012 R2. Well, I intend to use the latest domain functional and forest functional level. However, I just wanted to show you there's another way of raising the forest as well as domain functional level. Okay, so specify domain controller capabilities. I want to keep it as a DNS server. I want to keep it as a global catalog as well. I do not want the read-only domain controller, and I hope you never get into this situation, but since it's asking, let's provide it a password. Verify the NetBIOS name assigned, and it usually brings up the NetBIOS name itself. Since this is a lab environment, I only have one drive on this machine, not like Microsoft OneDrive, but just a single drive, which is C drive. So I'll keep my sysvol folders and the database folder on this drive. You can select whichever drive, whichever path you want to provide. Okay, so let's review it. If you click on View Script, this is a PowerShell script which can be utilized if you are going to add more domain controllers into your domain. Essentially, what the engine does behind the scene is it's running the same PowerShell script that you see on your screen right now to create this domain controller. So I will say next. It's right now trying to verify the prerequisites. Now in the previous screen we saw that we selected domain name services and global catalog. Just in case you want to know what a DNS is, DNS is a record of the IP address with the fully qualified domain name. So as you know, the network only understands the IP address, it does not understand the name. Let me just click on install here, and then yeah, so as I was saying, if you ping www.google.com or if you ping www.cnn.com, your machine or the traffic which is starting from your machine does not care about what you have typed. All it understands about what is the address behind that name, behind that www.google.com or cnn.com, and the place where this information is mentioned, is stored, is known as DNS. So the traffic which starts from your machine, it first reaches a server where this DNS is configured, and it checks, okay, the IP address where I have to go is, let's say, 203.100.64.10 for and xyz.com, and that's where it wants to go. So that's DNS. A global catalog is like an index. So all the objects that you have in your Active Directory, all the information that you have in Active Directory, a global catalog is like an index to all that information that Active Directory holds. You can have as many global catalogs in your environment as the number of domain controllers. I will show you how to create, how to designate a domain controller as a global catalog. So, alright, in the meantime, it seems like it has finished promoting this server as a domain controller and saying you are about to sign out, and it's going for a restart, which is good. So let's come back up and we will see how our domain services is responding. this I'm using Oracle VirtualBox. Right, my machine is up. I'm trying to log in, and as we see, it is now asking me to log in with a domain user. The administrator, which was created before we promoted this as the domain, is now part of the domain. So let's try to log on to the domain and see if it's allowing me. Well, it seems like it's preparing the windows and configuring policies, so it seems alright. It seems like my domain is working. Okay, so let's see what we got now. Opening up Server Manager. Okay, so as we see, it has joined this computer to the domain that we created. Now your domain controller is always the first computer that gets joined to the domain that you have just promoted. Right, so we have got DNS as well on this machine. Let's see, let's try to open up Active Directory users in computer. And that's our domain that we just created. These are the users by default. So let's go ahead and try to create a few more users. I will create another user. Call it as admin. And as I see, it's asking, it's joining this user to as a member to domain admin groups, which is fine, which is what I wanted. Account. I want to create a user account. So let's see. User. Give it a password. Set as password never expires. And then make this user member of the domain admin groups. All right. Now before we forget, let's go ahead and raise the forest and domain functional levels. For that purpose, you can go into Active Directory Administrator Center. Well, in fact, most of the activities that we usually perform can be performed using Active Directory Administrative Center. See, it lets you perform a lot of activities. Alright, so what are we going to do now? We are going to raise the forest functional level to 2016, and it tells us you cannot reverse it, which is fine, which is what we wanted. Again, we also want to raise the domain functional Okay, so both the domain and the forest functional level were raised at the same time. Let's look into the group policy management, and I'm pretty sure right now it's no policies as of now. That is just a default domain policy, and there is hardly any setting, I presume. Quickly looking under the Active Directory sites and services. So as I mentioned, there is only default policies as of now. We are going to configure all these policies. Going under Active Directory sites and services, the default first name, the server lists the server that we are logged onto right now, and this is where you can make the ADDS settings if you want to, set the replication time and other things, which I'm going to skip for this video. The last thing which I want to check is my DNS. Okay, and the forward lookup, well, right now, as I mentioned, this is the only server which is connected to this domain, and it's showing its IP address. So it seems like the domain is promoted fine. In the next videos, we will try to also install the DHCP on the server, and then we will see if the other servers in the network are getting the dynamic allocation of IP address. Thank you very much for watching this video. Stay tuned for some good stuffs coming down.